screams in the night, Indian legends, miles of footprints, sightings. What are these elusive hominids that stalk the wilderness? Join us for eyewitness accounts, questions and answers, Bigfoot encounters of the past, and ongoing encounters in the present. Your host, two-time witness, field researcher for 43 years, William Jevning. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We're doing our second part with Dalton. Fellas, how are you doing today?
Very good.
Doing well, gentlemen.
Well, gentlemen, let's go ahead and continue with our talk with Dalton. I know he has a lot more to talk about, and then we can, whatever questions come up, we'll just go ahead and address those.
Yeah, so Dalton, I was going to ask, because I know that you were just recounting your last experience, but you also mentioned that you had 3 other experiences, and I'm just curious about those and how they compared.
Oh, yeah. So, actually, when we just had a break, I wrote down 1998, 2014, 15, and 19. And the ones that have completely go back to that context of how it's shaken an experienced person, not the soldiers, that was just the application, but an experienced person, as far as me experiencing trauma in very high stress or stressful situations, 1998 is actually the one that is, from a tactical level, what I just wrote down. So 1998 elk hunt near ambush, and I would have never just labeled that near ambush if I didn't have my background, because what I'm going to try and explain is, I believe 100% is what happened to me as a younger buck. And Will, when we first talked, as I was just shakily and rambling this to you, I had mentioned I was elk hunting and I went in the brush and I saw this and this was going on. It's like every little thing that didn't make sense to me, and like I said, it started in 98 on this elk hunt, came to light, right? And while working through the fear of it, and I had the context of understanding that whatever I saw on my fishing excursion is what was being executed. That's the word. Whatever I saw was being executed on me in 98. And this is when I was a civilian. This is when I had no base to apply any type of, I would have had no chance as far as tactical survival. Everybody says, yeah, I grew up in the woods, and not me, but that general statement, I hunt my whole life. And now, looking back, especially with the service, I didn't know a damn thing. You guys want me to go through the events? Was that your question, Brian?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Through the events.
Yeah, because like I said, to me, this is what I just told you about the 2019 and actual visual contact, and in 98. The only two between there is, I found some tracks, and I had one of these things rip my target apart. We found 20-inch tracks in the snow. That's, to me, that I don't care. I don't care about the tracks. I really piecing together this 98. So 1998, I was a timber cutter at the time, and I did that like part-time, and I was doing that to put myself through paramedic school. I wanted to be a paramedic. So my occupation gave me a really good opportunity, spending out those early hours in the high timber in the Cascades. I figure where the elk are at. So that was pretty cool. And in the evenings I go to paramedic school. So found where the elk were at. I get there late. I actually had a final class. I think it was at 9. Anyways, I finally get in the bush around 1 o'clock or 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm driving up to this area. I cut some elk tracks going across. They're coming off the bank, going into a flat plateau area, I'll say. Not too steep, but the terrain is brushy reprod with your classic ponderosa pine, Doug fir, kind of a mixture of stuff, right? Visibility level is once you get off road into this particular stand of this plateau, probably 50 feet at most. When you get around the bigger trees, your area's a little bit bigger. But I would say your average visibility is going to be 50 feet. So I get out, cut these elk tracks, and I had a really, really, really successful elk hunting teacher, my uncle. You don't follow elk tracks. You need to make a decision. Do you go right or do you go left? So I actually did that. Didn't follow the tracks. I walked down the road a little bit, kind of looked on my map, and like, okay, I'm going to approach this way because elk circle you and do all that stuff. So that's what I did. Put my pack on, not worried about noise because I'm going to go down to my avenue of approach and then bust in the timber. So I do that, walk about, 100, maybe 120, 130 meters from where I parked the truck, and then I decide to put my insertion point in. I walk, it must have been, maybe 100 feet off the road, like really close. I heard a noise. Okay, and this is to my rear where I kind of where I parked my truck, not where I went in to timber, where I parked my truck. And what I heard was it sounded like a damn owl, and it went whoop, oh woo, oh woo. 3 different woos, owls, but 3 different types of tones, and that's it. Like, all right. I start sneaking. I don't see any elk tracks. I got my head to the ground, head up. I'm being a real inexperienced hunter at the time. To my front, I hear like cracking. I look up and there's a tree shaking. It's just whipping back and forth. Size of the tree is not much, maybe 10 inches diameter. I'm really excited. Like, oh my God, there's a bull rubbing his horns. I got these guys. I got them. I saw the elk tracks that I saw, at least 15, 16 head of elk. I am right in the middle of them. That's what I'm thinking. So I start to approach. I take my pack off. I'm trying to get light because they're right there. I start crawling on my knees a little bit. This tree is still whipping back and forth, but I don't smell. That's a big thing. You always, when you're in the middle of elk, even after you bust them out, you can always smell them. They just smell. They smell rank. It's not a big deal. It's not like a wet dog. They're musky. That would be my musky. Not a big deal. This tree is still whipping, but I don't hear the horns. I don't hear the classic bull rubbing his horns. And he's not. And this time of year, he's not. Shining them. He's thrashing a tree because he's doing his testosterone deal, right? I don't see any elk, so I advance a little bit. I finally I keep going, but when I get to the tree, there's not a goddamn elk there. Immediately to my right, I hear movement, okay? I just hear the brush popping. My visibility, even when I got to this tree, that, 10, 12, 14 inches around, there's no way an elk is going to move that. When they do bust trees, they're small, man. They might be, 50 feet tall, but the diameter is not very big. This is a fir tree that was whipping back and forth. To my left now, I hear the same type of thing. I just hear brush popping, but I cannot see anything. So I get down on my knees and I'm looking for elk legs. Now, what the hell's going on? I don't see a damn thing. To my rear, so trees on my 12 o'clock, truck is my insertion point. I just walked in a straight line, like I said, about, not too far in, 100 feet. Now I'm probably 200 feet in. The truck is roughly, the tree is at my 12 o'clock. The truck is on my probably 8 o'clock. Well, I hear the same type of owl sound. It only does it one time, okay? To my right, I hear movement. To my left, I hear movement. And I'm very confused. I saw a tree shaking. I'm right at that tree. I didn't hear any elk bust out. Don't smell the elk. Here's another part where I say I was inexperienced hunter at the time. There's no elk tracks in there. So I had my head down. So I get up, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? They must have moved on me. They're around me, so I'm not successful. I can't see anything. Can't smell them. As I'm turning around, I walk from that 12 o'clock tree I'm at that was just whipping around. I about face. Here comes a stick from my left to the right. And I guess it's not a stick, to be accurate. A lot of deadfall in the forest, tree, just a chunk of wood, but it's dead. It comes flying across from my left to right, about eye defilade, 10 feet in front of me. I hear another whoop to the back, what I would call like an owl. This one's a lot deeper. It's not. I don't know how to explain it. That's the best I can do. Mm-hmm. So now I figure out what's going on. I got people in here screwing around with me. Okay. Obviously, someone's in there yelling. They're not talking. They're trying to screw this elk hunter up. I still hear noises going on my right and left. In the distance, it's a little bit closer here, a little bit closer, but it's not right there. I still can't see anything, can't smell the elk, I say, hey, start getting really, really angry. I said, what the F are you guys doing? I'm hunting. Stop effing around. I have a rifle. Next thing that gets thrown your way is not going to be a stick. It's going to be at a .338 Win Mag. The right-hand side of me starts to, I don't know how to explain it. Is it a grunt or is it snort? I don't know how to explain it. It's a sound I've never heard before. The best I can do is I thought somebody was grunting, snorting, like, you got a big loogie. I was trying to avoid saying that like a 6-year-old. Got a loogie. That's what I thought I heard. So now I'm 100% convinced these are people screwing around. They're still making my right and my left are still making noise. I don't hear the owl behind me anymore. But I hear this loogie, grunt, snort, whatever it is. Now I'm really, really pissed. I figure these guys around me, they don't want to communicate, but they're doing their best to close in on me as people. So I turn around, I shoot 2 rounds in that tree, and I shoot another 2 rounds right at that stick on the ground. And I said, hey, I'm not effing around anymore. And I'm very, very upset. F this, F that, I'm not messing around anymore. I said, you guys can F and have them. And I was referring to the elk. You guys can have them then, fine. So I just walked out of there, got in my truck, and took off. And then I drove around the other side and, was very, very uneventful, didn't see any elk, didn't smell any elk. So here's where I'm wrapping this up. I believe I got caught and this is veteran Dalton talking now. I believe what I saw when I was fishing caught me in a near ambush, or that's what they were trying to do. Because there's a couple details here that don't make sense. I know what happened now, but as I was working through this, and this is when we talked, Will, and these things were kind of going through my head, and I was like, this tree was shaking, and oh my God, and you told me it's about numbers, and I said, do they ambush? You remember that conversation? Well, I was just spilling this out in our first conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I put things together, man. I believe, as knowing what I know about the military now, that they were drawing me in for a near ambush. And I can rule people out on when I skeptically, because that's how you got to look at all this shit. You got to rule all the other stuff out, even though I knew after I saw what I saw, this thing, as I was working this backwards planning into my head about the 1998 first encounter I believe I had. I believe they were drawing me in on a near ambush. Nothing that I couldn't shake that tree. Okay. An elk can't shake that tree. A bear, I had no, rule a bear out. No elk horns, no bear claw marks. Okay, let's rule the tree out. Let's rule the crunching around. This snort, loogie, grunt. I don't even know how to make that sound, but I heard it on my right. And this is what I know from war. Okay, when you shoot at people, the normal human physiological response is for them to actually squat down. Okay, they squat and they yell. They make noise because it's a very, very uncomfortable feeling when you get shot at. But I've done that enough in particular situations to move, we'll say, individuals from here to here. But they always make noise. And I've done it at close range, roughly a little farther away in actual combat. But the distance these things were around me, the normal human response is for anybody to say, hey, no, I'm just joking around. I'm just kidding. But nobody made a sound. And when you had told me the numbers thing, Will, and, talk out loud, we kind of went through, it may have been our third conversation we had privately, talking about making noise and talking out loud. And I believe my gunshots helped. And like I said, I told my wife this last night. It kind of hit me. I said, no wonder I ended up in the type of ops unit I was in, because I'm such an asshole, aggressiveness with my personality, like type AAA. That's what I believe saved me when I was a kid and didn't know anything. I got pissed off. I yelled, and I yelled a lot. And I also fired a couple rounds, right, to the tree, into that stick. And I believe that's why I walked out of that situation. So
yeah, Dalton.
Down and yep.
Oh no, I was just going to say, or just kind of an observation, and I was just about to ask Will this. The fact that, obviously, like you said, firing your gun, I'm sure helped, but even prior to that, just the fact that you were talking out loud, that may have confused them, because they didn't know if you were alone or if that, somebody was on the way, perhaps, and that maybe saved you. Just like Will, because this happened with Gerald.
Yeah, very similar.
Who's this?
Yeah.
Do you know anybody this happened to, Will? If you do, I would love to. I guess, I don't know how we get in contact, but there's some other details that are, I need to sort out. There's a few other things that I really want to make sure that's accurate, and this is more on a tactical level, Will, of what was going on, just besides I heard brush and I heard this and some sounds. Yeah, I don't know, Brian. Like I said, it just kind of, my ability to get angry in that situation, yeah, maybe talking about. I was yelling. I was really, really upset. I'm a 20-year-old kid who thinks he's going to kill his first bull elk, and and they ruined it, right? And all the way until, and that's what I thought, all the way until probably 5 or 10 minutes before I first made contact with Will, and we talked on the phone, and I just tried to, everything was just pouring out of me, right? I saw this and that, but that's where, to me, that's as a warrior, as a person, protector, just a normal human being, I feel like I was hunted, right? Now I can accept getting hunted by people, right? You guys used to pay me to do that. I can accept
you're on a
getting
level
mauled by a
playing ground
cougar.
there.
Yeah, I accept I can get mauled by a mountain lion or a bear, but we understand those things, right? But what I've been trying to sort out here is I do not accept. It's been beyond violating, number one, strategically looking at another ambush predator, and that's what the hell I think they are, another ambush predator that was way better than me.
Yes, that's
right?
correct.
Okay? And that's beyond humbling, all right? It's not like when you see a big bear in the woods and it's like, wow, that's a really awesome creature. It's dangerous. There's some real normal, primal, instinctual feelings, but if it doesn't maul you and it's doing its thing, you look at that thing and you're like, man, that's pretty cool. I respect that thing. Nothing like this, man. This is violation. This is, and like I said, I may have these intense feelings because I do know what it's like to be hunted by people. But this really trying to, and I'm still working through this. These things, I'm not sure I would have walked out of that, man. And, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure, looking back, what would my family think? That's a whole nother conversation about, what actually is being told and what goes on with particular events. But yeah, that, to me, that experience, I believe the trigger, the initiation of actually seeing whatever I saw, really in the backwards events is the thing that really bothers me the most. And I mean, it's really shaken me up, man, because, I don't like to lose, number one. Okay. I just, like I said, and trying to present my background of how I've lived my life and who I am. I mean, another predator got the drop on me, man, and I don't like it under those circumstances. I don't like that.
I'm going to jump in for a second. I just want to make a comment, though, if we can find silver lining in your experience, and I think there is one pretty significant. Everything you talked about is the describing of, the stumbling on this thing, okay, and the way you were able to get there. I really believe that you're inadvertently helping other people who are going to have similar situations and how to deal with it. So if there's, and there is some good that's coming out of this, is that you're kind of writing a book or writing a chapter, certainly a paragraph or two on surviving this situation.
Sure.
What do you think
Absolutely,
about?
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about it. And I'm sure you have your situational awareness is greatly heightened now that if you go back out in the woods.
Oh yeah. Tom, I'm first of all, we had planned to kill another bull this year. Actually, the photo I sent you, Will, I want to get the raghorn to the herd bull. So unfortunately, it's in the same area where this went down. Real quick, yeah, I do it, and this has changed with me, Tom, probably the last couple of weeks. I've been, like I said, I've been really trying to work through this, that it went from, I think, all the normal responses due to this context. I'm never going out there, man. And that's pretty big, I don't really hunt for sport. My wife and I do not buy meat. We got the Chinook, and we always kill a couple bucks. We kill a couple bear every year. We kill an elk. So that's kind of our lifestyle. And when I said I'm never going out there again, it was big, right? Issue is now, and I better be careful how I say this, but I view this situation because I know. I need to be very humble here. I believe what they did to me was near ambush me or try. That this touches on lots of levels. National security issue for people.
Right.
People's safety in general, right? People's safety in general. And my approach now, and I don't mean any threats on this, but I did quite disclose my third reason for calling my office buddy is, number one, get off my chest. Number two, he's got the clearance. But number three, I much am considering taking a tactical approach with some of my peers as far as going back out there. Now, I'm not talking about to neutralize. I'm talking about I think that, and I say this in a very, very humble way, but there is a difference between trained guys going out trying to understand this and get some tactical information compared to, these finding Bigfoot guys. I don't know a damn thing. Those guys know way more than me, but I know how to lay in a hide and be very quiet and absorb myself into that surrounding, right? And here's where I'm going with this. If when my buddy retires next year, because he actually wants to move down the street from me, if we can go out with the proper leadership through my new unit, you guys will, teaching me what I need to look for, helping with whatever your guys' cause. Well, my cause is along the line, I guess, national security, people's safety, number 1 and 2. But if you can go out and the area in which I grew up in, this will be my 26th year hunting these areas, if you can identify, hey, if they're doing this in this area, an AO, then maybe we can go over here and be safe and do it in this area, right? So if you can learn on a tactical level, through all the normal stuff, what we call, SR, special reconnaissance, to identify, hey, if this shit's going on over here, I'm going to elk hunt over here, so I don't run into these problems again, right? And however that information comes out, and what you guys are doing to help people and the reasons why. And again, I'm really speculating because, like I said, I'm so uneducated on this topic, and
you and I've talked
I guess
about
what your guys' mission statement would be really nice to, hey guys, we're not going to go elk hunting over here because, these things they're hunting right now. We don't want to get caught in an air ambush, right? So,
right.
I'm really working.
Yeah, you and I have talked about working on a project together, but so we don't want to go too much into that.
Yeah.
I am interested though, on something that you talked about in regard to salmon that you caught and were missing, and where you found the remains.
Yeah, Will and Brian, this was your original question, Brian. What were my kind of other, I get, what do you call them, distal? I call 2019 a direct contact. At these other and I would. Now I didn't have any visuals. The ones in between there, 2014 and 15, Brian, for your original questions, go along with all these other little activities. So what this particular fishing area, so I'm the last guy that goes in there. It's just kind of a dying breed and culture thing. It's like guys in hockey, there's a breed that does not, their grandfather did. They don't have to wear visors, right? Not that many. And again, the tactics in which certain guys fish, there used to be quite a few people going into this area, and these guys are dead and buried now, or too old to do it. So very modestly, I am one of the last guys that does this. Oh, my wife too. But when groups of guys were going in there, and I don't want to give a number to give it away, but we would periodically have our fish come up missing, okay? Catch fish, put it particular, how do I say this so I'm not giving away? We'll catch a fish, and then we'll step back from the riverbank itself, and then stage it in an area, bleed it out, and do its thing, okay? But it's kind of it's a very steep ground up against this hill, much like it's the same chunk of hill, okay, in which that bull that saddles in and where this creature, evaded and took off. We put it right up against that. The bear in the area there's been, throughout history that I know of, with my own eyes and just talking to the other guys, because that was a big ass concern to me, was, now the bear don't come down here, and knowing what I know now, yes, it's not the way they travel and do things, right? The only other thing would be the river otter, right? But they're pretty spooky. They do take salmon, okay, but they don't take it out underneath your nose, and you don't find it hanging in a tree along the trail that you walk out a couple days later, a few weeks later. So when I had told Will this, it's been sporadic over several of my years down in this, what did I call it, gentlemen? Bravo fishing hole. That I roughly lost somewhere around 730 to, one of them was big, like a 42-pound Chinook that just was gone. I caught my next fish. I tagged it. I'm going over there, and I was like, where the hell is my fish? Now, where we stand and catch fish, where we stage the fish, is probably, I need to be very accurate about this, 48, 50 meters, not too far. But the line of sight is that we're kind of in a depression standing on a rock right on the edge. And the only way to really see what's going on behind us is, you need to be about 30 feet tall. Okay. But again, these are some things I've experienced, and I can only count for 7. The other guys I know, they've lost several over time. And it only happens a certain part of year. It only happens in the springtime between April and July. And it's only been Chinook salmon. It's never been steelhead. It's never been silvers. And those are the only, fish we can catch. But we would find, or I would find, or I'd hear stories, or I'd find the other guys' fish. When we go in there, we used to go in there when I go with these old timers in groups. And it's not right on the trail. Okay. We start to smell them. But it's in that little basin area, like I said, where the elk bed down. We'd find them wedged in a tree, just the bones. Sometimes the tail was missing on it. Most of the meat was gone. Always wasps, flies, the normal critters that take care of it. But the issue is that it's about 10 feet in the tree, and it's just hanging there. And when I start to rule the skepticism out here, we always see, not always, but when we do see the otters, they have an SOP on how they operate, man. They don't drag it a quarter mile up the trail, a mile and a half up the trail, put in a tree. They drag it right on the riverbank, and they go to town and eat that thing as fast as they can, because the bald eagles come in and the buzzards come in, right? They need to gorge quickly, right? And as far as I know, throughout the history here in this particular area, I can't account for the rest of the river system itself, but no black bear has ever came down and taken someone's salmon that I know of in this particular Bravo area that we fished. So that's kind of a little weird, difficult thing that happens. But when I start piecing some things together here, it happens. I saw this. The thing that changed my absolute reality in life, I saw this in May. Our fish come up missing, like I said, anywhere from... Now let me back up. The only time to get that we do fish in the Bravo area is when the water conditions, right? So if we got a lot of snow up the river and the river's blowing out and high, we got to wait for the river to drop down. So there's been a few times that, no one's been across a river. And then in my new generation coming up, I would be one of the last, individuals to do that. So on the timeline and frequency of it, it's very variable. But I haven't been back over there in about 3 years based on water conditions, and that's the only reason I went to the Bravo area, is because we, lack of snowpack this year and other conditions. But these things have happened. So, that's just one of those things in this particular area. And we had talked, prior to our conversation, Tom Wallace, that you kind of know the area. If we draw that straight line, this goes all the way to, kind of your neck of the woods. I would say the same Cascade Mountain Range and what I would call their AO, right? Their area of operation, whatever they do. These little things take place. But yeah, that's the deal with the fish.
Well, the deal with the fish also is you've done a process of elimination for what could do that. Because I've seen the river otters. They're actually kind of...
You've seen what they do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of them, the ones I've seen actually were on the coast. I'm assuming the river. They're huge. They're about the size of dogs, and they eat crayfish, and salmon, and they get their hands on. But I can't think of anything that would. Number one, why? What benefit would there be to hang that fish up in a tree? Number two, that's
Sure.
a behavior that none of us have ever heard of. I've never heard of that. That's
Yes, it's
sense.
there's some logistics behind this. It's and I don't want to give it away. The logistics of this particular spot, when we can talk privately, it'll totally make sense. So it's an opportunistic thing that only happens under these circumstances, right? You got to have a fisherman yanking them out of that particular hole and spot, putting them in that particular place, and along with being skeptical and ruling people out, everybody's there, right? We have accountability of each other, right? You know,
Sure.
even if there's only one way out for a human being, and everybody's going to see them packing their 30-pound salmon out of there if they're the ones doing that, right? So it's kind of an accountability thing where you can rule people out. It also only happens, which is unique to this particular Bravo spot, is that and a lot of times when we were all doing this, a collective group, there's guys both across the river from each other. So we have situational awareness and what I'm going to call accountability of sitting there staring at another guy across from you, and they're doing the same thing, right? But this only happens under circumstances in which we as a fishermen are fishing straight down at our feet and have our back towards the bluff, the rock, the terrain. And this, so, you know, there's this little other tactical flashing lights that's been going off in my head about these little things that have, you know, and like I said, I can only account for this, and this is over a 25-year period, right?
Hey, fellas.
But
the reason
Yes.
I brought that up, why it was an interest, is there's a connection to it. And
Really?
I mentioned my book, Bigfoot Evidence, the last one I published. I put lots of pictures of different types of evidence in there. And one of the things I put in there, I received through our JRG leader, Jeremiah Fountain, from the Adirondack Mountains. And there's a piece of property there.
New York area?
Yes.
Okay.
A lady who's a nurse who actually lives here in Northern California now, but is from that area and has property there. There's a tree on their property, and a deer was hung 11 feet up this tree 2 different times.
Oh my goodness!
Over a several-year time period, and these things could be for, you know, baiting other animals. In other words, if you're going to maximize the food intake, you put something up that's going to attract other animals. So you've
Absolutely.
actually magnified the amount of food potential.
Absolutely. Wow. And you know, those deer, like I said, Adirondack said, I did some training up in that area, and there's a pretty big white-tailed deer in certain areas. I don't know if it's a doe or a buck, but you know, and I'm sure it varies in the area, but you're talking 200 pounds.
Right, and it's not something cougars do. When you look on the various states' websites about cougar behavior, cougars...
That's not their MO. That's not how they do it.
They partially bury their kills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's just the opposite. Plus, a cougar, I mean, a good-sized cougar could weigh, 200 pounds? They're not going to lift their own weight up on a tree 11 feet. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no kidding.
They could do it.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have pictures of it, so
And you know-
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, like I said, Will, I feel like a BF, right? Buddy effort, you know, being an Army guy. I'm going to get my intel from you. I want to get the books, and you mentioned that. Like I said, I need to get on that. I'm trying to get a really good control of myself and situational awareness so that when I can start learning from you guys, right? All three of you.
Well, I think it's reciprocal.
I have myself under control, right? So I could, you know, have the other lights going off in my head. I wanted to, Brian, I'm sorry, Tom, there's a little echo, so it's a little late. What did you say, Tom?
No, I just said, you said you want to learn from us. I was saying it's entirely reciprocal as well. So.
Sure. Well, did you want me to mention, like I said, I briefly wrote down, when when I told you my unit member, him and his wife, and myself, and another one of our ops guy was on leave. We went out target shooting, and we found the 20-inch tracks.
Yes, that'd be.
I mean, like I said, Oh, okay. So this is 2014. Gentlemen, same area. We're talking 15 square miles, okay? Different elevation. Circumstances were, I had my buddies here on leave. There were 5 of us and his wife. What do Army guys like to do? They like to go shoot shit, right? So we ordered like about 2,500 rounds. Went really high up in this area, and then it snowed. And it was a lock gate. I had a Jeep Rubicon at the time, and we had, Jeeps are really nice as far as maneuvering. So we were able to cut several miles off our trip just to get to this area. And what we did is the day before, we spent about $250 building a target, and we were going to do some 1,000-yard. About 800-yard shooting, 800-meter shooting. The area in which we set the target up, we wanted to put it right in the road. So just if we're down on the lower end part of the road, we're shooting up. We wanted positive angle shots that day. So we spend a lot of money. We buy 4x4s. We're using huge lag bolts, like, when you're building joists, you're building decks. I mean, we put a lot of effort and money into building these targets. And what we did, target, and probably measurements were, I think it was 6 by 8. So that's the dimensions of target: 8 feet high, 6 feet wide. 6 feet wide. And it's all 4x4, and it's all lag bolt together. I'm talking bolts, nuts, washers, because we're hanging these very heavy gongs on it. And our idea was that, yeah, man, we need a really good military grade target. It's not to set a pop can out there, and we want to do some serious shooting, get some new data. I had just built a 338 Lapua, so I wanted some good data. And the conditions were, we didn't want to drive if something happened to our target, because it's kind of a switchbacky road. It takes a long time driving distance to get there just for an 800-meter, slope shot. So it had snowed that day, and we were the first and only people up there from when we drove off the main highway, and we broke track all the way up to this area. The borders are not too far, Tom, from, we'll say okay,
yeah,
that type area, but just take that and go directly due east 50 miles, okay?
All right.
Somewhere around there, okay. So, and then, well, I'm giving a smoke screen, but same, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. This is tricky because my wife, she said, you are such a bad liar, man. So I'm like, all right, cool. Anyways, there we go. It's out. Who cares? We set the target up, and we break track all the way, long distance. So we're going to rule people out all the way, okay? No human contact out there. And besides, all the bordering areas with, warehouse or BLM, all locked off. So we're the only 5 individuals up there. We bang off probably, I think, 1,200 rounds that day. Target's doing awesome. I mean, we got great data on the 338 Lapua, but they're like, man, we got to come back again and get the rest of it. So, pack up, go home. We get back up there the next day, and I think it snowed. I'm not sure exactly, but it covered enough to where our tracks were completely covered. So we're breaking track again. Get up, get to the same area in which we shot. We can't see our target. It's gone. So what the hell is going on? Well, what's going on? So we have a target that weighs, I'm going to say 300 pounds with the gongs hanging on and the 4x4s.
Yeah.
it's kind of confusing. Like, what the heck? We really sandbagged it in. And, we just shot over 1,000 rounds and hit this thing, and it didn't fall. It did snow. We specifically went to this area because, we tracked the weather conditions. It's not windy out, so we're going to roll wind out. Kind of all the variables that don't make any sense. We all get in the vehicle because it's kind of confusing. So my buddy's wife, 2 guys, myself, and another, so 2 fires separate. Yeah, okay. We drive up there. Our target is in pieces. Okay. It's kind of on the left-hand part of in this road. I think is probably just big enough to put, Suburban width, or one of those units called Chevy. So Chevy Suburban, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the road is very narrow. And the reason that's coming to my head is because some of the forester guys, the Forest Service guys in our state, they drive those. Yeah, it's just, that's why they make them that wide in this particular area. So,
and they pinstripe the truck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, roger that. So our target is ripped apart, and what we see is and it's kind of on the more towards the left edge of this brush. It's not brush. It's actually, dug for, that's about, 9-10 feet tall, really young stuff. But it's like you know what I'm talking about, Tom, really clumped together.
Yeah.
You walk 2 feet in, and yeah, it's close, man. So obviously they'll send it out. But the point in which these big tracks came out, and it was a straight line, and it wasn't very far. I think we counted like 13 tracks from where it actually came out of the left-hand side of the brush there of these fir trees. It walked in a straight line to the target, and there was just a commotion around it. It literally looked like a big mess. Okay, just if you could roll around and get underground and make snow angels, and yeah, look, it really pissed. That's kind of looked like somebody got really pissed. To the left. Yeah, target is on its left side, or to the left area of the edge of the brush here. The tracks then leave this commotion area, and like I said, the best way I can describe it is obviously see the line of tracks going to the target, but the snow was so torn up, you can actually start to see, the bottom of the dirt aggregate road there, and then right from that area, the tracks go. I think there were, and I got the pictures of this. I think there was another 6 tracks, and it went right back in the same area it came from. And the issues with that is that I stuck my rifle barrel down to it, and then from the end of my muzzle to where I had a 28-inch barrel on it was where the stamping was on the 338 Lapua, the barrel there. It was on the part of the 8. Okay, brought that home. When we brought it home, it measured, 20. It's somewhere between 20 and 21 inches. Like I said, we did the best we could with the snow. We averaged some things out. So we'll say 20 inches. And the other issue with it is that where the tracks came in and went out is a major, major, major bluff. Okay? You know how it is. You got that steep kind of ridge. You got a little bit of terrain, flat spots, benches. And there's a lot in the Cascades. There's a lot of, I guess people call them dead-end bluffs, but they're not too bad, but you're not going to crawl out without a rope, right?
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, we saw this. My buddy's response was to his wife, "Get your ass in the truck." The other 2 guys and I, the rest of us, and I don't quite have my count down, guys, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to be real accurate, but 1, 2, doesn't matter. The commandos here. We take a knee. We look at each other and said, "Are we seeing what we're seeing?" We're like, "Yeah." So we did. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. No.
I'm sorry.
mesmerized.
There's kind of an echo on my end, and I'm sorry. I feel like it's going to echo. We take a knee and we do what's called 5 and 25. So we spread out, start scanning, and we try to cut tracks. We're looking for human tracks. We're looking for everything to try and explain this situation. Okay, and we can't. We do the best we can with looking over the edge to where we think it's going to go. But like I said, we got kind of a good look, and it's rocky, bluffy, and it looks like it's vertical. I'm not saying the thing jumped off. I mean, obviously it negotiated terrain that was illogical for any of us to negotiate.
Yeah, but not.
And yeah, that's that. I mean, that it sounds, I think, after going through 1998 and actually seeing this thing, that encounter, to me right now, it's like, yeah, that's okay, cool. It's not really important, even though it's important. But the issues are when we had first created our conversation about, the 30% of this and believing and not believing, even after this happened to the group of us with our experiences, we came home and we just ordered pizza and beer and had a good time. We haven't spoke since about it until I made that phone call. I told you earlier to the same gentleman.
That was my question, Dalton, was after all of this, you weren't really that interested and maybe not a believer or just kind of on the fence. I know that's the question on a lot of our listeners' mind right now is,
yeah,
where were you at?
Quite honestly, this is exactly where I was at. It was really exciting, as I'd mentioned, we grew up in the Northwest and hear this, but when you see this, yeah, I mean, it was real, and I believed it then. The problem, I believe, I didn't see anything. It just did not register, man.
Yeah.
And I was still of that opinion of, there just might be one in the world, and wow, we saw its tracks. It tore our target apart, and that's another thing in itself. When I really drop back, I can't believe it ripped those 4x4s and lag bolts apart. That's unbelievable.
Well, that
you can't even do that if you drive over it with your truck.
Well, why did they do it? They must be watching you shoot those targets.
Yeah,
they were observing you.
And I can only imagine. And if you look at it this way, like I said, my perception now on these things is they're a big threat to a level, and I kind of tried to explain that earlier, but I think at the time I would probably chalk it up to if 1,000, I think it's 1,200 rounds that day, the 338 LaProix hit this gong all day long, I think that pissed me off. I don't know what their hearing abilities are, but that could be a reason.
Tom, I don't know if you remember, but when we talked to Lee recently, he had a very similar situation, actually, with an outhouse. If you recall, he talked about one of these things apparently took offense to something he did, and it ripped that outhouse apart, and it was built very sturdily, just like the target.
Yeah, it's funny because it seems like they react and they have kind of a short temper in some situations.
Sure.
They have a short fuse, and they take it out like on the outhouse, and then in Will's book, they took it out on some people's, the one in the occult. Do you remember that, Will?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's something we do hear about occasionally.
Wow.
And I'm going to comment.
Scare me. It didn't.
Area.
I'm sorry. It didn't scare me, Tom. To your question, it did not. I was intrigued. I was fascinated. It was exciting.
Yeah.
But I did not understand the fear level. I did not understand that until. That's what I've been working with these couple of weeks, right? And I told my mom and brother about that, And like I said, they're very, wow. Yeah. They're not, they believe. And, I had mentioned too, Will, I'm Ojibwa, Chippewa Indian. If I could just hit on that real quick, guys.
Yeah.
Would that be all right?
Absolutely.
And you kind of know about this, Will. Was trying, when I saw this creature, my initial feelings were not just I would think the normal ones of this is irrational, what the hell's going on. I had this feeling inside of me that was very, and I'm not talking spiritual, I'm talking beyond physiological, I'm talking DNA, right? And it's really simple the way one of my and currently living ancestors presented. The gentleman he asked me when I seek this individual, he asked me what tribe I came from, but yet my last name does not match up with any, there's no hints that I would be Native American, okay? Because I explained the way I explained to him, I think he already knew. And the way it was presented to me was that it's embedded in our people, and he just said our people. But my paramedic in mine is on that physiological level. We all have traits, we have feelings that we might feel, smell, that may happen from caveman days. But how do we apply that? Or what does that mean? And the way he presented to me to help me understand the way I expressed my uttermost fear of not understanding was that our people, the Ojibwa, Chippewa, dealt with these things in Canada. And I think my particular family connection came down through Canada and in the Michigan area and things like that. And that's what he said to me. So, I'm very logical. I'm very, I need that data and proof. I mean, it's either black and white. And again, I'm not talking the spiritual part, but that really made a lot of sense to me. And I believe these extra curricular feelings and these heightened awareness are not from a soldier's point of view. They might be the fact that I'm living blood, like all of us might be tied to these things with our ancestors back then, having to deal with whatever's going on back in the day. So I thought that was really interesting. At least it was a pretty damn good explanation that took a little bit of weight off my shoulders with what's going on. Whether it's right or wrong, it made sense to me, right?
Yeah, my family's Chippewa also, but we didn't have any, and I never thought to bring it up. Yeah, everybody's from Wisconsin, at least on my mother's side of the family.
Oh, wow.
My father's.
Well, you and I got more in common. You got more in common than you'll ever know. That's where my family's from.
We do, yes. But, I think it doesn't have to be necessarily native blood. I think it's as a species.
Oh, yeah.
We have genetic, I think there's genetic memory with these things that go far beyond any written or verbal history that was passed down. I think our ancient ancestors had a lot to deal with these things, and we've forgotten about it because I think we felt that we exterminated them, this threat, and we have forgotten it. There's just echoes of stories that are fairy tales and things that have a common theme. And I think it connects to our actual encounters with these things or dealings with them.
Wow. So would that be what we may articulate as primal fear?
Yeah, I think our ancestors were preyed on. I think our ancestors were preyed on by these things to a large extent. And it kind of drove us to be what we became. And as a former soldier like I do, in our natural state when we're fighting, we're very nasty creatures. And
yes, we are.
And we're pack hunters, and it's what put us at the top of the food chain, at least what we thought was the top of the food chain.
Exactly.
And look how we react to threats against us. And I always use the example of a dog, man's best friend. When a dog bites somebody, it's almost universal now, at least in this country, to put the animal down. So if we react that way to a man's best friend, what are we going to do to something that's eating us?
Yeah. Wow.
Well, fellas, we're actually getting kind of close on our time here. Any final thoughts?
Just want to thank Dalton for coming on.
Yeah. Oh, guys, listen. No, thank you. This has been I think it's been a very life-altering, emotional situation here. That, like you just said, Will, touches us from our DNA all the way back, whether we're Chippewa or not, all of us, right, through our history, and it's still doing it now, right?
Correct.
But then it's been a huge, honor that you guys would just let me process and vent. Much the same through any type of, and I'm not embarrassed to say this. This is over the top. Combat was bad, and I'm sure I'll get some perspective and balance this out. But right now, this is traumatic experience of seeing one of these things, looking back, knowing that. What did you just say, Will? They used to eat us. I thought, well, yeah. I'm sure they were going to get me. But it's been a very grateful. I thank you for the service you guys are doing, have done, and are going to do to offer, myself, others, anybody who is dealing with this trauma, an area to vent. And man, my shoulders are light again. So I really, really appreciate it, gentlemen.
Well, Dalton, I do too. It's an absolutely fascinating account. I got to say that to me, it felt like today for you, you're doing a debrief with us, and you're telling us,
yes,
especially on that last experience, things that you did right and things that you would have done better. And so in that sense, again, I'm just going to go back and say what I said earlier, and that is your information is helping others. We're building the knowledge base, and you're helping others if they run into this situation, how to deal with it, how to react. So thank you for that.
Thank you, guys.
And if you'd like to, you can come on again, and we usually do a Q&A. Some of the shows we don't. It depends on because we're a little behind on recording those, but sometimes the witnesses are very interesting. Of course, we have Jim's narration that'll be it's on the end of each show. But you're more than welcome to come on and do the Q&A with us, and that's just we throw around questions and talk about various parts of this subject.
Sure, I would be more than honored to do that. I don't know anything. I don't, but
I'm sure you have questions.
I'd be more than honored. Absolutely. I would be more than happy if you'd be willing. So thank you so much, gentlemen. I really, really appreciate it.
Brian, any final thoughts?
No, I think I'm all set. And once again, just thank you, Dalton, for coming on and sharing your experiences.
Absolutely, and
fellas, thank you.
I really appreciate you guys, taking the time. And folks, stay tuned for the next segment. Well, fellas, I'm not sure what questions we have to start out with, or if there's a particular topic. I know off the show we were talking about a while back a couple of things. There were some articles. We'll bring that up in another show, but I found some more interesting things that we could chat about in regards to primates and some particulars. But what do you guys have for us this week?
Oh, okay, well, I can start it off. So Mike asks, he was listening to the Brenda Harris interview from a few weeks ago, and he asked, surely they can't fly, right? But so that's his first question. I mean, she wasn't being literal, right? And then also, though, I mean, is it possible that they do leap and jump great distances?
Oh, I'm sure that's possible, and they're in trees occasionally, so, but as far as flight, they're not going to fly any more, than we would flapping our arms, or a chimp or a gorilla would.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to note, too, that a lot of times witnesses might see things and they might kind of jump to conclusions a lot of times, I would say.
You know, what's interesting about jumping to conclusions, you know, I was reading through the comments on the YouTube page on not this week's posting, but the previous one. And somebody made the comment, there's always the naysayers against Patterson and Gimlin's film. And someone made the comment about, you know, they're frauds, you need to go check out whatever website it was. And then the person made the comment about Patterson being a filmmaker and a designer. He was neither one of those. Patterson was a construction worker.
Yeah.
And you know, I know that from discussions with Mrs. Patterson, and she told me a lot of stuff about, you know, their lives back in the late 1960s, and, you know, even some financial things about, you know, how they really didn't have a lot of money. So, you know, it's just ludicrous for somebody to believe things like that. And the same thing with people like M.K. Davis, who come up with these crazy ideas about what happened there, and which did not happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think it also underscores a point that a lot of people, I've heard comments that, well, they, you know, they went looking for this thing and then they found it. And so I think a good response to that is, so they found what they were looking for. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your point?
Well, and you know, we've talked about that. They knew there were Sasquatches in the area at that particular time, and Al Hodgson called and told them, hey, if you want to come down and see something, you better do it now, which they did. So, and they just happened to, you know, come upon that creature.
You know, and that was part of the reason I'd asked the question. Well, I don't know, a couple weeks back, about using horses to look for these creatures. Would that give you an advantage? And I think the answer was yes. And that's part of the advantage I think they had, was they were in an area where these things were prevalent, and they were using using livestock or horses.
Yeah, there's a lot of deer and elk in that area, and you know, an elk is comparable in size to a horse, so you know, four-legged walking with hooves could easily be mistaken for an elk.
Yeah. So, maybe that's a tip to any would-be people out there that want to go looking for Bigfoot. Learn how to ride a horse if you don't know how to do so already, and horses are mules.
Yeah, noise camouflage.
Yeah, and actually, to getting back to Mike's question though, or his point, I think about that he's right about them leaping though, because there are so many reports of them, crossing a road with just like 2 or 3 steps. In other words, their stride is really, really long, and they can move distances very, very quickly.
Oh yeah, very quick.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Brian. And doesn't that also bring up the point that so many reports, gosh, almost 90% of the reports talk about how quickly they cross the road. So aren't we really looking at consistency in reports from a variety of different time periods and a variety of different sources?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, well, I had a question. This is kind of going back to Jonathan's question from last week. And he has another one, too, by the way, that I'll get to coming up here. But going back to his question about last week, about how there are reports of them reaching 12 feet in height. And I think that, we've covered that's probably unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Usually
very
they're
unusual.
not. They're not that tall. But I had a kind of a follow-up question to that, because it seems like, and this is not a blanket statement because it can differ for person to person, but for the most part, though, human beings that are unusually tall, let's say 7 feet or above, tend to have shorter lifespans and they also tend to have worse vision than a normal-sized human being. And I'm just curious to know if, even an 8-foot Sasquatch, is there any evidence that their vision is maybe that suffers a little bit compared to humans, or and also about their lifespan? Is there any evidence that they're like what their lifespan is?
Not that I'm aware of, but here's the thing about the height and like physiology issues. When you look at a human, I'm not sure what the average is today for height. I'm sure somewhere between 5'5" and 6 foot tall for an adult male. When a human grows, let's say to 8 feet, that's outside of our normal design by quite a bit. So yeah, there's going to be problems because it overworks the body. It's not designed for that size. The Sasquatch is designed for that size and build. So that would be normal for them. Now, if there was one, let's say, excessively large, then it would probably have similar issues, I would assume.
Yeah.
Now, as far as lifespan, nobody knows, but I'm assuming it's around the same as what chimps and gorillas would have in the wild.
Yeah, because I think the average for a gorilla is about 35 or 40 or so. So maybe it's probably maybe similar to what a Sasquatch.
I would think so. I mean, depending on how hard a life they have in a particular area and genetics, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, so Jonathan also has another question here. Have you ever heard of the Sykesville monster?
I have, yes.
And he says apparently they found the monster's bones, and he just wants to know what your perspective is on that.
Well, I think if they find these days, especially if they find bones or something like that, it would sort of be out of the bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that if they did have bones, it wasn't from something unusual. It was probably a known animal of some kind. Because
that doesn't ring a bell for me. I
was just going to say, and on the other part of that question, since there wasn't anything really said about that, maybe the story about bones being found was not accurate.
Right. Yeah, I've never even heard of Sykesville, so I never heard of that before.
Yeah, I have an article somewhere in my files, and I can't remember the details off the top of my head because there's so many articles, but I do remember that name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would think that bones, because the marrow of the bones, I would think that would have the DNA. I mean, that would just be a huge find. That would be a huge discovery.
Oh, yeah. It'd be a big deal, and you don't hear anything about it, so...
So Will, I guess maybe we should have Brenda on again because she was such a great guest. But and so this is kind of a question for her, but also maybe a question that you know about. I was just going to ask: were there certain tribes, Native Americans, like Native American tribes, that had more sightings than others, maybe in different geographic areas throughout the United States?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can't, specifics are, of course, in Alaska and Washington State, places like that have had more. I mean, look at the some of the tribes on the west coast of Washington that have as many as 5 different names for these things. So that tells you quite a bit as opposed to other locations that maybe don't have a great deal of information.
A follow-up to that, Brian, would be, or Will, both of you, would be, do you know if there's a heat map of any kind that has been compiled that would show a distribution of sightings or maybe a historical map also that would show the sightings of these things? So in other words, you could take a look at one region of the North American continent and see where there's greater activity or greater sightings.
It's interesting. Occasionally somebody will come up, they'll make a map, and I don't know. It's kind of difficult because you don't know how well each of the cases were examined, to be proven legitimate or not. I think some people just collect a lot of stuff online and produce these maps because one of them I saw not long ago had a lot more sightings in the southeast than on the west coast. And yet we get a lot more reports on the west coast than from those parts of the country. And I know there are people who will say, oh, no, we get lots of sightings. And no, the west coast historically has had a lot more.
So it'd be really subjective.
Yeah, I think it depends on, the kind of work that was put into putting a map like that together. I've seen some older ones, from a few decades ago that were actually pretty good. I met a couple of guys from Seattle who put one together. I was in the Columbia River Gorge, and I actually saw the map. It was hanging on the bathroom wall. It was actually a large poster-sized map, and I would have loved to have had a copy of it because I knew a number of the notations on it to be accurate, where these sightings had taken place. And the guys had quit producing the map. They didn't even have any for themselves, but it was interesting to meet them. They'd actually done some pretty good work digging into that information and trying to make an accurate map. Now, some of the things, again, if the map wasn't put together by somebody really diligent in digging into those stories and making sure they were accurate, instead of just saying, well, Joe Bob down the street claims he saw a Bigfoot, let's put that on the map. I think a good, accurate map requires a little bit more work than that.
Yeah. Right. It's too bad those guys weren't still producing that map, because that would be some data.
You ever seen the old Metzger's maps? They're blue and white. You know the kind I'm talking about.
What were they about?
They're usually it was called a Metzger's map. They were usually county and other, sometimes larger areas.
Right. Yeah.
The map actually looked quite a bit like one of those. It was a really good depiction. And
somebody had gone out and really did their groundwork to get the data.
Yeah, they dug the information up pretty well, I thought.
As a kind of a sideline to that, I don't know if it was the Forest Service or the Department of the Interior, one of those two federal agencies, had a position that was an anthropologist. This might be something we could look into. And I saw an interview with the anthropologist, and although she's never seen, she doesn't have a sighting herself, she became a believer simply from her own research for, it might have been the DOI, simply because after several hundred names, distinct different names from different tribes for this creature, she became a believer. And last count on the interview I saw, she said she was over 500.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's interesting. And with most people, academics are the same way. Just like anybody else, it sort of depends on if they're open-minded enough to, take into account all the information that's out there and say, wow, this is a little bit more than just a few people making things up.
Right. It's a pattern.
It's a pattern, yes.
Yeah, a very consistent pattern.
But it is interesting when you think about how maybe different Native American, because there are so many different Native American tribes, how some of them may have interpreted this creature a little bit differently. How maybe some of them just wanted to be, okay, just leave us alone, let's stay away from it, or others maybe worshipped it,
Well, remember what I talked about previously in other shows with the elder that I had been in touch with from the Haida tribe, who he gave me a little education on the way Native folks look at things in this subject in particular. And his, advice was you have to take into account what each group's experience with them has been, because he says a whole we'll just say, could be a regional view of the creature. Let's say north. I don't want to pick a location because then I'll get nasty emails. But let's just say a regional group of natives. We won't specify locations or anything, but just as an example, let's say that they have an outlook that the things are not very nice. They will harm people, things like that. And then let's say 2 states away they have the opposite viewpoint. He said that it could be the tribe's experience with these things. In other words, historically they had a lot of contact, and this was the net result of those contacts. Could be a band, a particular group, a family, or even an individual's experience that could color the whole group's point of view of these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I thought that was very illuminating.
That would make sense too, because you could also, within the same tribe, even within the same family, you could have 2 totally different, or 2 variations of an experience, and they would have 2 different interpretations.
Yeah, and it depends on how everyone else who knows about it in that particular region, which side they would, believe or support. And I think a lot of it's, not just with Native folks, it's everybody. It's what their personal beliefs are on how they view the subject.
Right, because Will, in your own case, your sister didn't believe you for a long time until she saw one too.
No, she raked us over the coals pretty good until she had her own sighting.
Yeah.
That was a good story, because if I remember correctly, she kind of sheepishly drew you aside at a family reunion or something.
Oh, no, I went up to visit him for Thanksgiving. This was back in the 90s. And when my brother-in-law went out of the room for something, went upstairs, she says, I got something I need to talk to you about. And she was very kind of reticent to pull this information out. In fact, I've talked to her. I wanted to do a recorded interview with her about that experience. And she'll do it, but I can't use her name. I can't use her voice or anything. I'll have to write it down and have somebody else read it.
Oh, that's too bad. I was just going to say she'd be a good guest. I mean, she would be, let's face it, she's Will's sister, the founder of this organization.
Well, my family's real big on privacy, so I understand that.
Okay, sure.
It took me a lot of years to really come out into the public and talk about things, because I used to be the same way. I was, enjoyed my privacy. I still do a great deal, but with this subject, I don't mind coming out and talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you ever, just out of curiosity, when you talk to her, does a subject ever come up, or?
Once in a while. I mean, because, they know I'm an author and have been on television and done, to do the show and a number of other things. So, occasionally, something will come up in conversation.
And the other thing is, these experiences, especially the visual experiences, have a way of sticking with you for life. They kind of linger. Especially
hers. I actually think hers was more frightening than mine was.
Oh, really? Now, do you mind?
Well,
sort of recounting hers a little bit?
I mean, first of all, in my account, I walked in on this thing. I had a rifle. It didn't do anything, and I shot, and then the other one came and I left. Her experience, of course, she was of the opposite mindset. My brother-in-law said that they were doing something. They lived in an apartment a few miles from where I did, and him and some of his friends, I guess they had a neighbor that was kind of unruly, noisy, things like that. So I think they were doing a little payback one night. So my sister went and stayed the night with another of our sisters, who lived just a few miles from where we grew up. And, the boys, they were going to be in the apartment and kind of raise hell and stuff like that to, I guess, do whatever to this neighbor, whatever was going on.
Right.
So about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, she, decided that she didn't want to spend the whole night. She wanted to go home. So, and I think my first niece, not my first niece, her first born, because I have 3 older sisters and they all have kids, so she's younger than me. She wasn't pregnant. I think she had my niece by then. But anyway, so she was on her way back to their home, their apartment, and she was going through the area where we grew up, and not too far from where I actually had my encounter. And back in those days, it was just there was a four-way intersection, and there was just a red flashing light. That was the only thing that was there. There was a street light on one corner. There was an old feed store, and I think it was closed at this time, so there was no business there. It was just an empty building. And across the street, there was an old house, but it was converted into a little store that a family owned. So that was all that was there. There was nothing except pastures and forest in the area other than that. So it was a pretty lonely stretch of road. And she was coming down, and she got to where the street light was. She was going to make a left turn, and this creature was on the shoulder of the road under the street light. And she drove really close to it, and it was kind of jumping up and down like it was very agitated. And
wow,
you can imagine the shock. And I think that was, in my perspective, it was a more frightening encounter than what I experienced.
Yeah, it's very animated.
Yeah, very much so.
Wow. And how long did it take her to confide to you what happened?
That was probably 1981, and I don't think she told me for at least 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
yeah. So how about, I'm just curious about other family members. Are they on board with this, or how do they, you don't have to say if you don't want to. But.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that we don't really talk to anymore. 2 of my sisters sort of, I guess, sort of left the family because they don't talk to anyone anymore. We don't know where they are, but the other 2 sisters, they it might come up passing in a conversation, but they're okay with it.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, because it's like you're, they've got to realize, you've been on TV shows and you published books, and
I guess that's why it's okay, because they can say, well, their brother is, an author and done A, B, and C, instead of just being the local kook.
It's interesting because I've kind of gotten to the point where when I bring the subject up, and I find it's really important how you bring it up. You bring it up as if you
exactly.
You're talking factual, and honestly, I got a lot of that from this program. Talking to you, you're not trying to convince anybody of anything. It's just a very factual conversation, and that brings a response from the listener, from the person, to, even if they're a skeptic, to listen in a very different light, more seriously.
And that's a good point. Myself and you fellas also, we're not out to convince people. We discuss things, we talk to guests, and for myself, I just talk about things that I have learned, over, in a few more years, it'll be 5 decades. So, I would hope over that time you pick up a little bit of knowledge, and we use that in the course of these conversations.
It does, and it absolutely comes through. And I'm going to just say this, and maybe a little bit of a shout out to folks out there who might be listening, who've had an experience and are maybe on the edge as whether they want to contact us or not. When I first communicated with you, it was through email. And I thought, there's no way I'm ever going to hear from this guy.
I get that a lot from people.
Well, yeah, that's just, don't take it personally, because it's not you personally. It is the filter, I think, that most people bring to not only this topic, but just in general. It's kind of a public forum, and it's almost like contacting somebody, for lack of a better word, maybe a public person or showbiz or something like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in that position, and you do. There's a lot of crazy people out there, unfortunately, and they will just say and do things for, whatever reason. You can't even try to guess. It's not even worth the effort to try to figure out what's in some people's minds. But and I noticed that even with the YouTube, channel, put the shows up there, and some of the insane comments, and of course they get deleted. They don't get posted. You and I chatted by text earlier. I was considering not allowing any comments at all on YouTube, but you made a good point. It's nice for people who are interested and have something to say, to have a place to make that comment. And I want to apologize to people that there's been a couple that said, well, I'm not up there chatting with people, and it's not my purpose. I don't have time to do that. I have far too many things going on, and with close to 160 posts on YouTube, I can't sit and go through all those. It's really time consuming, so I try to do the best I can. Occasionally I'll answer a question, but it's not something I can really keep up with. So, but it's it's for people to post things if they have comments, something to say, and sometimes other people will respond to those things that folks say on there. So that's kind of what that's for.
And that's right. But you do. I know you go through, and I know you read every one of them. I go through after every show, and I read them. I suspect Brian reads them as well, and they're interesting. And so folks, keep bringing them, because there's literally thousands of perspectives and thousands of viewpoints that somebody's going to have a question that we haven't thought of. They're going to bring a different facet to this.
And there are some very interesting people that come up there and write things. So, folks, we definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
and while we're on that subject, I think we should mention right here that, if you've got something to say, you don't have to put it on YouTube. Contact us on the webpage on creekdevil.com.
Right.
Exactly. And it's, if you just go to creekdevil.com, and if you scroll to the bottom, there's a big black button. You just click it, and you can, you can ask any question you want, and you can if you want to, but it's not necessary to ask to remain anonymous. That's our default position with everybody. And even those who give us a first and last name, and ask us to use their first and last name, I think more often than not, we decline. We would just use a first name.
It actually would be nice to know, person's name and where they're from. It doesn't have to be specific. We won't use that information, but, it would be nice to know who we're talking to or answering a question for.
Yeah, and on top of that, I would just like to say, please do give us your first and last name. Tell us where you're from, and that way we can inform you if there's any activity in your area, because you might be interested in knowing that.
Absolutely, and that's something we'd like to do on the webpage. So if you tell us your name, and like I said, it doesn't have to be specific. You want to just say the state, that's fine, and we can post things up there. We get information of activity. And I'll give you for instance. I got a good friend of mine called me night before last, and his nephew had a sighting while hunting, and I'm waiting to hear back from the nephew. But it was a pretty interesting sounding encounter, somewhat aggressive. The person didn't believe in Sasquatches until that happened. He got screamed at, and promptly got the heck out of the area.
I do hope we hear from this person, and I would like to say that I'm going to go back and talk about when you, I, Brian, and a guy named Troy. Mm-hmm. So I hope Troy's listening. I'd love to hear from him again.
I would too.
the first time I called you guys, I was nervous, but here I'm talking to 4 people that I didn't have to jump over that hurdle of convincing you of what my experience was. I was treated respectfully, and you understood, because you all have that background. So again, just kind of a shout out to folks out there, if they want to get a hold of us, if they would like to be on the show and they had an experience. It's a real good feeling to be able to just kind of share it, and sometimes you're sort of unburdening.
And to kind of go back to the question thing, and YouTube, a lot of folks will post things on YouTube. It would be better if you would send something on the website, because a lot of times we may not respond or even see the things on YouTube. Email us at the website, and we will definitely respond to comments or questions there, because Brian and Tom go through those all the time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I have seen where people have been on the website where somebody's asked the question, or there have been people that have had encounters, and another viewer has directed them towards the website. Mm-hmm. So yeah, by all means. And here it is. It's questions@creekdevil.com. If you don't want to go to the website, just, send us an email, questions@creekdevil.com, and we'll ask your question for you on the air. Just remember, the default position is we keep you anonymous.
Right. And like I said, if you send something to the website, we will absolutely address it. YouTube is hit and miss at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Will, I wanted to ask you about ex-military witnesses and so forth, because I know that we've had a lot of people from the military on in recent weeks.
Yes.
I know that you're obviously ex-military and everything, but how often is it that somebody from the military will have a sighting that gets reported to you?
For a long time it wasn't many, but since I've like you mentioned, I've had quite a few people who've contacted me who are military or former military, and a lot of times it's because they know I'm a veteran. So veterans, right. we all talk to each other, we all kind of speak the same language, and a lot of times it's just that bond. And I've been getting a lot more in the recent year or two.
Yeah, that was my question, is that because of your own experience, does that lead more people to have greater confidence in trusting you to talk to?
It's a comfort zone, because, all of us who worn a uniform, and Tom, you know what I'm talking about, we know what each other has been through. We kind of know, we're known quantities to each other for the most part. And I think it's just it's a little bit more comfortable to talk to someone else who's been in uniform, because you sort of you've had shared experiences. Maybe not the exact same place and time, but there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah,
and in general, respect.
Yeah, in general, I think they make for more trustworthy witnesses, basically.
For the most part, sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of the witnesses, and Brian, you and I have talked about this, so many of the witnesses that have contacted us that are not military, but people that are outdoor enthusiasts. Maybe they've spent a lot of time outdoors. Maybe they spent just a little bit of time outdoors. And I just I can't say this strongly enough, that there sometimes is a perception that they're undereducated. And that is simply not true. They are highly educated in their field, which would be the outdoors. And we value that.
And that brings up something that Todd, our friend up north here, and I were talking about just the other day. It's something I've done a lot of, is hiking around Mount Rainier and other regions. with my buddies, and he said that a lot of his friends do a lot of hiking, and apparently there is a lot of stuff that goes on in the hiking community that they never talk about. So if anyone, are hikers out there and you've had an encounter with a Sasquatch, by all means get in touch with us.
I'm glad you brought that up, because my brother sends me links from one of the hiking forums. I'm not sure I'm going to bring it up just yet. I'll talk to you after the show and see if it's appropriate to do that. But there is one of the largest hiking forums, and you do get comments. My brother routinely sends these to me, and they're very interesting. So within that community, it's the same community as any other community. You've got the believers and the non-believers, and all the different personality types.
Sure. Well, I mean, it never hurts to ask, right?
No, absolutely not.
Hey, Will, I was going to ask, how do you think that you're so successful in terms of getting information out of people that you interview over the years?
I think it's just the approach. It's just that sort of flat. I'm not giggling, not laughing, not joking. And I've seen a lot of people come into the subject in different approaches, and mine was always because I knew what I saw, and I wasn't going to expect anything less than just telling people straightforward, this is what I do, this is what I saw,
Yeah.
And I think people respond positively to that. Tom, you mentioned that. I mean, it's all in your approach.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to say, Brian, that's a very good question, and it is sort of contagious the way you treat the the witnesses in a very matter-of-fact way. We're talking about something that, again, we don't have to overcome any hurdles of silliness or disbelief, or all of that is just simply non-existent in the conversation.
And it kind of goes back to the old timers. When I saw them interacting with locals, it was the same way, and there wasn't any of the snickering or side looks, things like that. It was always very matter of fact, straightforward. It was A, B, C, and D. This is, and where we're going with this, and so on. And I thought it just sort of it felt comfortable, seeing it in action like that. So I didn't see any. I didn't even think about it in terms of approach. It was just sort of automatic when I saw them do that, and I figured, well, that's the way to conduct yourself.
Yeah, and it is. The snickering is, I think it's kind of a psychological defense mechanism to say, well, maybe I believe in it, but I'm still on this side of the fence in case you're on this side of the fence too.
And I've seen so many people do that, and I'm thinking, what a horrible way to approach people that have had a horrible experience. And you're right. You can tell when somebody sort of got one foot on each side of the fence.
Right.
And it's sort of like, well, how do I trust this person? Because maybe one minute they're believing me, and as soon as I leave, they're making fun of me with their pals.
You hit the nail on the head. How can I trust this person?
Exactly.
So, yeah. And if their foot is on either side of the fence. And so that's...
Or there's people out there who, they'll believe certain parts of a person's story and not other parts of the story. Well, how do you believe that person? Were you there witnessing the encounter with that person? You don't know what they experienced.
Right. And
exactly.
The other thing too, Will, is and I'm not just talking about interviewing people, but also, it's funny. I have been watching the show Forensic Files because it's been featured on Netflix, so I've been kind of going through a marathon.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But also, just how when you examine a situation like the Goldhammer family or whatever, but you examine the context and you ask questions. It's the same way that good detectives do and good forensic scientists do when they are investigating a case like that.
Yeah, you collect up the information, the facts that you have.
I think that's also, it's not just right.
Yeah, when you follow the information that you initially have, if you're doing your job right, it will lead you to more facts and details, and mm-hmm. Theoretically, it should lead you to a conclusion.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm scrambling, but what was the title of the book? The 101 book.
Oh, Bigfoot Fieldwork 101.
Yeah, and half of that, the latter half of that book, is all about forensic evidence.
Now, that book is not going to teach you how to find Sasquatch. What that book is intended for is because my thinking when I put that together was giving people the tools of a foundation. If you really want to be interested in doing this, you can go out and find all kinds. There's people that find stuff all the time. It's what they do with it when they find it that's important. And if you don't do the right things, then what you find is meaningless. Now, my background was initially anthropology and archaeology before I went on to psychology, but I really enjoyed archaeology. And in fact, when I retire, I'm thinking about going back and getting a degree in archaeology, just because it was a lot of fun. And I apply a lot of what I learned in the field school to this subject in terms of documenting, because the aim is, long after I'm gone, I want people in the future, if whatever I have is of any value scientifically, they can take that information and recreate it in a lab somewhere and be able to use it.
That's interesting. And
so with that book, that's what they should be able to do, get that foundation to collect the information and catalog it properly.
Well, exactly. And I want to say that the book is also written in a way to the novice, to somebody who is just stepping into
absolutely
this, as an interest, which is what I did. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I need there's a list in there of things that you need. And I went out and I got those things, most of them. And so anyway, just from that standpoint, it's a great starting point.
Now, Will, has your interviewing strategy changed over the years since you started interviewing witnesses, or has it basically stayed relatively the same, would you say?
It's changed. Initially, I think when you first start out doing things, you don't really know what to ask,
what to expect.
And you're always second guessing yourself later. Did I ask everything? And then if you miss things, for me, I always hated pestering people, and being intrusive in their lives. So I was always very careful to try to get everything, in one interview. Of course, now, over this many years, I ask less and listen more, because listening, you get more information. Some people, they like to ask a lot of questions, and unfortunately, that makes people kind of clam up, and the questions they get, that's the only answers they're going to get through that interview. If you let people talk and listen, you're going to get the whole story.
Well, that makes sense too.
Right, because it seems like it would be less of an interrogation and almost just like them explaining everything in their own words,
right,
feeling more comfortable. Yeah.
People will follow the path of least resistance. So if somebody is interviewing and they have, let's say, 10 questions, and the interviewer walks away with 10 answers, if you listen and not lead the witness, let them lead you, you might get 100 answers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's sort of my method.
And those 100 answers would be answers that you didn't even know.
Exactly.
You needed to ask. Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
And if you listen, and if you miss something, then you can ask the person, or maybe to clarify something. Now, on the show, sometimes I'll ask somebody a question, and it's to clarify something that maybe listeners need a bigger perspective on, or something like that, a little more context to understand where it is they're coming from.
So another question is, and one of my favorite books was the story about the Goldhammer, the Goldhammer family. Have you, in like them or some of the other accounts like this, do you ever stay in contact with them, or do they ever, periodically stay in touch with you?
Oh yeah. I stay in touch with people for decades sometimes. But people come and go, so sometimes you lose contacts, but and that's something that I was taught to do, is to stay in contact with witnesses for a long time. And some of them, turn out to be really good friends, like, look at you guys. So,
yeah.
If nothing else, it's a great way to meet people and to make friends, and that you might not ever meet otherwise. So to me, it's been a real privilege to meet a lot of really nice people.
Yeah, I agree. And and I also wonder if over time some of these people don't have maybe another encounter, or updates.
Occasionally, like we're gonna interview Chris this weekend, Chris in Tennessee, and same with Don in Maine. Occasionally they have, there's ongoing things, so we'll get periodic updates, and Chris has some new updates for us, so it'll be interesting to hear from him.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. I haven't met Chris yet, or I can't remember if I have or not.
Hey. Yeah. Hey, now, Will, do you have a new field guide book that's coming out, or?
I do. I'm working on one. I haven't really given it a name yet, but I am working on one.
Okay.
That's good. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was just saying, how's that going to be new or unique from the latest one?
Well, I don't want to give too much away because people steal my ideas, so we'll wait till it's out, and then we'll talk about it more.
Okay.
And I'm not sure when it's going to be finished. I've been kind of burning the candle at 3 different ends, it seems like, for the past couple of weeks, so I'll get it done as soon as I can. It's not going to be real long, but it's going to be informative.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, is accurate, good information.
And it is a guide. It's not a full book. It's just a guide. I am working on a third volume of the Witness of the Unknown books. So if anybody has encounters that they've had, and want to, write it out in an email or a letter, and send it to me, if they don't mind my publishing it, I would appreciate all the stories I can get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a good question for some of the guests that we've had on, over the last weeks and months, if we could include them, because every single one of those is just absolutely phenomenal. Those stories are just, they stand on their own merits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we're getting down on time. Oh, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead. We still got a few minutes.
Oh, yeah. Just to kind of switch topics a little bit, but I know that we've talked before about the show Finding Bigfoot or not Finding Bigfoot,
right?
But one of the interesting things that I just saw this article that was talking about how the Animal Planet is owned by the Discovery Channel. Okay, yes. And this Discovery Channel has a reputation for being really, really good, scientific, objective, and everything. And this article was kind of pointing out the fact that a show like Finding Bigfoot, because it's so ridiculous, it's so stupid, that in a way it's kind of hurting the Discovery Channel's reputation. And I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I definitely think it could, because Discovery, it is a good channel. They do produce a lot of good shows. There was a point a few years back they were interested in having a show with me in it. Of course, we won't go into the details of that, but someone else shot that down, and I wasn't aware of what was going on at the time. But I think we could do a really good show, if they were interested in doing when we have a few ideas. But I think they could do. There could be a much better show done on the subject.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. I mean, I don't know what the ratings are for finding Bigfoot, but I suppose maybe they're, I guess, good enough to get another season. I think, but
I think they're done now.
Oh, are they?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think they've it's kind of exhausted. It's
would that be called a mercy killing?
Well, and Brian, this. I mean, you're an English teacher, and you specialize, or you certainly have done a lot of script writing and screenwriting, and you understand that there's a formula, and the formula was the same, that's understandable each episode, and it's just the details were unique for each show. But and I can't badmouth the guys. I mean, if it's obviously they got paid to do this, so okay, well, you can't hold it against them. They had to have known that going into the woods with a entourage and lights and cameras and all that, you're not going to. Hunters don't do that. You're not going to catch a deer.
I don't think they cared.
Yeah, I don't either. Right.
And the things that they were doing, I think they believed in what they were doing, which means they really didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seemed like a big money grab that, like I said, I mean, it may hurt the reputation of Discovery Channel, but I'm sure they'll bounce back. And, they, for the most part, they have quality programming. But,
yes, they do.
Yeah. But it's just kind of funny.
Well, anything else, fellas, or what do you think?
I guess not for tonight. So.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good conversation tonight.
Well, we'll chat a bit when we're done here, and then, folks, stay tuned for this third segment.
Welcome. This story is being brought to you by William Jevning and is being narrated by me, Jim Sower. For more than a century, people have been saying that a huge, hairy, primitive human roams the unmapped mountains of the Northwest. Here is the first tangible evidence that Bigfoot or Sasquatch really exists. The first photos of Bigfoot, California's legendary abominable snowman, by Ivan T. Sanderson. Sanderson was heavily credentialed. Listen for his bio at the end of this story. At 3:30 p.m. on the 20th of October last year, two young men, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, were packing it on horseback into one of the last remaining great wilderness areas, northeast of Eureka, California. Their saddlebags contained on one side rifles and grub, and on the other ready-loaded movie and still cameras and other equipment. They were following a creek which had been washed out 2 years ago in the terrible floods that devastated most of Northern California. This was some 20 miles beyond the end of an access road for logging and about 35 miles in from the nearest and only blacktop road in this vast and yet not fully mapped area of national forest. I have been up this bluff creek, and as a botanist I can tell you that it is rugged. 4 layers of tiers of trees that the tallest is up to 200 feet, and dense undergrowth. Also, the terrain goes up and down a gigantic sawtooth. Roger and Bob rounded a sharp bend in the sandy arroyo of the creek. Then it happened. The horses reared suddenly in alarm and threw both riders. Luckily, Roger fell off to the right and, being an experienced horseman, disengaged himself and grabbed his camera. Why? Because he had spotted what had turned their horses into mad broncos. At about 100 feet ahead, and on the other side of the creek bed, there was a huge, hairy creature that walked like a man. The way Roger described it to me would not, I am afraid, make much sense to you, but then Roger had been hunting this sort of creature for many years. What he actually said was, "Gosh darn it, Ivan, right there was a Bigfoot, and for pity's sake, she was a female. Just wait till you see the film." Roger is a Northwesterner, and he does not waste words, but what he does say, I listen to. This is what he told me. On the other side of the creek, back up against the trees, there was a sort of man creature that we estimated later, by measuring some logs that appear in the film, to have been about 7 feet tall. Both Bob and I estimate, and this pretty well matched what others told us from the examination of the depth to which her track sank into the hard sand, that she would weigh about 350 pounds. She was covered with short, shiny black hair, even her big, droopy breasts. She seemed to have a sort of peak on the back of her head, but whether this was longer hair or not, I don't know. Anyhow, hair came right down her forehead to meet her eyebrows, if she had any, and it came right up to her just under her cheekbones. Oh, and get this, she had no neck. What I mean is, the bottom of her head just seemed to broaden out onto and into her wide, muscular shoulders. I don't think you'll see it in the film, but she walked like a big man in no hurry, and the soles of her feet were definitely light in color. This last bit got me, as I have seen really black-skinned Melanesians with pale pink palms and soles. I don't want to sound facetious, but this whole thing gets hairier and hairier, as you will see in a moment. Roger did something then that I have never known any professional photographers to do. Even if his camera was loaded with the right film, he had the cap lens off, the thing was set to the right f-stop, and so on. He started running, hand-holding his Kodak 16mm loaded with Kodachrome film, trying to focus on this creature. What he got was just about what any amateur would get in such circumstances, but then he got a real break. As Roger put it, she was just swinging along as the first part of my film shows, but all of a sudden, she just stopped dead and looked around at me. She wasn't scared a bit. Fact is, I don't think she was scared of me, and the only thing I can think of is that the clicking of my camera was new to her. "Okay," I said, "tell me this, Roger. The hunting season was on, wasn't it?" "You're darn shooting right it was," Bob Gimlin chimed in. "And out that way, anything moving with fur on it is liable to get shot. But actually, there just aren't any hunters way up there. 20 miles beyond the only road known as the Bluff Creek access, could it be that Mrs. Bigfoot knew all about guns but was puzzled by the whirring of a small movie camera? And another thing, everybody who says they have been close to one of these creatures or has found one of their beds has stressed the ghastly, nauseating stink they exude and leave behind. Was this what really scared the horses? Or did the horses scare the adorable woodsman, which is my name for the lady? While we referred to this in the title as the Abominable Snowman for purposes of quick identification, the Bigfoot or Sasquatch, zoologically, has nothing to do with the Himalayan abominable snowman known for centuries in Asia, and first brought to the attention of the Western world in 1921. Our Lady is a form of primitive, full-furred human. The Yeti, or abominable snowman of the Himalayas, is some sort of giant rock-climbing ape, in my opinion, and that of Professor Carlton S. Kuhn. The Yeti footprints found have an opposed big toe, almost like a hand. The Bigfoot has an unopposed toe, such as is seen only on human-type creatures. While Roger took the film, Bob got the horses calmed down and then rode over the creek. Roger was running again after the Bigfoot, still hand-holding his movie camera. Despite the logs and trash on the route that she took, and it was not even a game trail, he got sortie parting shots which turned out to be of particular interest to the scientists. But we will come to that later. At that point, I asked Bob, because he was then what is called the backup man, which means that he was now close enough to see Roger clearly, just what was Roger doing? Well, he was running like hell, jumping them logs and going up into the real thick bush. Did you see her too? Yeah, Ivan, but way ahead and really taking off for the hills. This brought me up sharp, because I had by that time viewed their film, and half a dozen of the takeouts blown up in full color as transparencies, which I had examined under strong magnifying lenses on illuminated shadow box several times, and projected by 3 different projectors. In every case, the creature was at standard speed for photogs, 24 frames per second. As Roger said, at first the thing just ambling along, swinging her rather long arms, not running scared, and even stopping for a brief look-see over her shoulder, as it were, then ambling on again into the deep woods. Yet here was the backup man saying that she had taken off for the hills. Roger, however, backed up his backup man unprompted. Yeah, when she got around the corner and into the real heavy stuff, the timber and underbrush, she did take off, running, I mean, because when we lost her tracks on the pine needles after tracking her for about 3.5 miles, we took plaster casts of her tracks. Now, down by the creek, in the sand, where we first spotted her, her stride was from 40 to 42 inches from the back of the heel to the left side to the back of the right heel ahead. But when she got really going, she left tracks that measured 65 inches from back heel to back heel. Man, she was running just like you and I do. Why she? I asked Roger. Well, Ivan, let's run that film through again, and you tell me, as a trained zoologist, if that thing has pendulous breasts or not. Well, we ran the film again, slowly, and we had a stop and hold device on the projector by which we can hold any frame without fear of burning it. This we did, and so help me, there are definitely large pendant breasts fully covered with short black hair. No ape or monkey is known to have any such development of the female mammary glands. Human beings, on the other hand, do, frequently. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin actually had nothing much more to add. They presented us, both newsmen and scientists, with this film for appraisal. We viewed it, and our findings follow. But for my money, these young men, after 6 years of sensible effort, have turned up with the first bit of possibly concrete evidence for something that, however fantastic it may sound, has been going on for years, both in this country and Canada, and a lot of other places in the world, like Russia, for instance. So let me get down to a proper analysis from both a scientific and a journalistic point of view. Before I do this, however, I want to say that in this day of technology, anything can be a hoax. But elaborate hoaxes cost a lot of money, and if they are to fool scientists and the like, they also require plenty of knowledge. Anyway, here's what we did to verify and check it out. I've known Roger Patterson by correspondence for about 6 years, he tells me, and this flatters the hell out of me that he got interested in this business from reading a book that I published in 1961, entitled Snowmen, Legend Come to Life, which was a compendium of all that I had been able to find in published form on this subject up to that date. I, myself, have been researching it since 1930. During this work, I found that the British had first become cognizant of the matter in Asia in 1921, and quite by mistake. However, as I went back in history, I discovered that just such hairy, primitive, non-tribalized, human-like creatures have been reported by scholars of various cultures and in literature for centuries from almost all over the world. Thus, what Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin achieved is not just an isolated incident. It fits a pattern, and precisely. But what happened next? Well, these young men had the sense to get their film carefully processed, under guard, a copy made, and the original locked up in a vault so that it could not be scratched, stolen, or destroyed. Then they went to the one group of people who really know about faking things, especially like King Kong, ape men, and other phony monsters, namely Universal Pictures in Hollywood. There they met Dale Sheets, head of the documentary film department, and top technicians in what is called the special effects department, who are the men who have actually made such things for the movies. They asked the technicians, in effect, "Look at this strip of film, fellows, and then tell us if you could produce that for us." "No," the experts answered. "Maybe if you allotted a couple of $1 million, we could try, but we'd have to invent a whole new set of artificial muscles, get a gorilla skin, and train an actor to walk like that. It might be done, but offhand, we'd say it would be nearly impossible. So then, Bob and Roger applied to various groups of American scientists out west. None were seriously interested. There were, however, 2 Canadians who had also been looking into this matter in their country, where the creatures have been named Sasquatches. These Canadians, Mr. John Green, a newspaper publisher of Harrison Lakes, British Columbia, and René de Hinden, originally a Swiss mountaineer, but for the past 2 decades a government forestry officer for the Canadian government, flew down to Yakima, Washington, and invited Roger, Bob, and Roger's brother-in-law, Al de Atley, to come up to British Columbia and give a group of scientists there a showing. They did, in Vancouver. At this meeting there were, in addition to Dr. Ian McTaggart Cowan, Dean of Graduate Studies at the University of British Columbia, who is the province's leading zoologist, a dozen or so scientists, including Don Abbott, an anthropologist with the Provincial Museum in Victoria. Most of the scientists admitted in print that, though they had come to the meeting skeptics, they had left somewhat shaken. Here's how they stated their reactions to the Vancouver province next day. Dr. McTaggart Cowan summed up the more cautious opinions when he said, "The more a thing deviates from the known, the better the proof of its existence must be." Don Abbott spoke for the dozen or so scientists who appeared remarkably close to being convinced. "It is about as hard to believe the film is faked as it is to admit that such a creature really lives. If there's a chance to follow up scientifically, my curiosity is built to the point where I'd want to go along with it. Like most scientists, however, I am not ready to put my reputation on the line until something concrete shows up, something like bones or a skull." Frank Beebe, well-known Vancouver naturalist and Provincial Museum illustrator, commented, "I'm not convinced, but I think the film is genuine. And if I were out in the mountains and I saw a thing like this one, I wouldn't shoot it. I'd be too afraid of how human it would look under the fur." From a scientific standpoint, one of the hardest facts to go against is that there is no evidence anywhere in the Western Hemisphere of primate, ape, monkey, evolution, and the creature in the film is definitely a primate. Beebe's objection, however, was typical of those given by other experts who ventured out of their own specialties to comment. Since I know something about primates and about geography, I brought this matter to the attention of Dr. Joseph T. Raitt, who happens to be the chief geographer of the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey. His statement appears in detail elsewhere in this magazine, but I may sum it up here by saying that the distinguished Dr. Raitt, whose doctorate, by the way, is in human ecology, responded in effect bunk to this last objection. One leading American weekly appeared to have been sufficiently impressed by the film to fly Roger, Bob, and Al with their film and outtakes from the same blown-up to New York to hear their story straight. Armed with the film and these statements, the 3 landed in New York and gave me a buzz. I was with them in 2 hours, and then the jazz began. Every time we called upon anybody, we were asked for further confirmation. It was not easy, but we got it, step by step. But after a week of spending other people's money, the boys, as I call them, though they are all married and fathers, got a really rude, flat, and, in my opinion, senseless turn-down. So that's why the story I'm writing is in these pages. The boys have not asked anybody for a single cent for what they've got. All they wanted was to be reimbursed for their out-of-pocket expenses. This has been done. For the rest, they need sufficient funds to mount a properly equipped but trained small group to go into this or another wilderness area for a full year to stage a real hunt for a Bigfoot, captured alive or on film, or else at least for a skull or other physical evidence. The most common question asked me about these Bigfoot of California and the similar Sasquatches of Canada is, why has nobody ever seen one? The answer to this is, they have, and by the hundreds, and for 100 years, let alone the earlier sightings by local Indians. One is even alleged to have been captured on the Trans-Canada Railroad's tracks in 1884, to have been examined by medical men and held in captivity for some time. It was even mentioned in official dispatches to the Crown by the then colonial governor of British Columbia. Further, I personally took an extended trip in 1959 to the west, covering just about every area from Alaska to California and even the Canadian Northwest Territories, interviewing several dozen people who said they had encountered these creatures. All of my findings up to 1961 went into my book, mentioned earlier. Since then, however, further reports have continued to stream in at a minimum of once a month. Meantime, 8 groups that I know of went into the field, apart from Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, and I know the last have several scores of interviews on tape with other witnesses. What is more, none other than Dr. Vladimir Markov, Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Calgary, Alberta, made 2 trips to the same area and assessed the current reports 2 years ago. The next most common question from non-zoologists, that is usually, why, if there are so many of these big creatures running around, haven't we ever found a single bone of one? My answer is simply to go and ask any game warden, real woodsman, or professional animal collector if he has ever found the dead body or even a bone of any wild animal, except along roads, of course, or if killed by man. I never have, in 40 years, in 5 continents. No, nature takes care of her own, and damned fast, too. But there is another point here. These creatures are apparently not even tribalized. In fact, they seem to be lone hunters or gatherers, forming only small family parties that break up as soon as the youngsters can get along on their own. Unlike the next stage up the ladder to people, they do not seem to bury their dead. If they did, we might have stumbled across their ritual burial grounds, even in caves, though such are rarities, where they are reported to live. Then there is another very prevalent notion. Almost everybody except zoologists, and even many of them, seems to believe that no big, new animals could still remain undiscovered. This is a complete fallacy. First, despite all the howls about our population explosion, more than half of the land surface of the earth has not yet been mapped or, for the most part, even penetrated. Further, the world's second bulkiest land animal, Cotton's wide-lipped rhinoceros, was not found until 1910, and the forest giraffe, or okapi, until 1911, and the giant sable antelope until 1929. Then there's the copri, the second largest ox, found in Indochina in 1956, and, of course, the coelacanth fish in 1938, thought to have been extinct for some 70 million years. I might add that 2 herds, numbering 400 and 300 head respectively, of forest bison, believed to have existed in not too pure a form in only one national park in Canada, turned up in 1960 only 80 miles from the new road going to Great Bear Lake. The Komodo dragon, which is the largest known reptile, wasn't discovered until 1912. The mountain gorilla, an ape species peculiar to Africa, was a native legend for centuries, just like Bigfoot and the abominable snowman, but he wasn't established as a real creature by scientists until 1901. The other most asked question comes from the zoologists and professional anthropologists. It is really twofold. How could such a creature be in the North American continent? Because not one single bone or tooth of any true monkey, as opposed to the South American monkeys, which are quite different, and much less an ape, has ever been found here. This is true, but then the same people turn right around and state that our Bigfoot, the Oma, and Sasquatches are hominids, meaning on the human branch of our old family tree. This I find to be completely ridiculous and totally unscientific. Let me explain. First, let us leave monkeys of all kinds out of it, and concentrate on what scientists call the pongids, or apes, the hominids, or man types. True, no ape has turned up on this continent, And I'm not surprised because they are tropical animals, and although there have been mild temperature times in the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, they have no reason to go meandering all the way up there and over here. The hominids, on the other hand, were represented by several types that lived in cold climates, even up to the ice front, in the case of the Neanderthals. What is more, hominids in the form of what we call humans, i.e. Homo sapiens, such as our American Indians and later the Eskimos, seem to have been able to get here over the land bridge, or the ice bridge at least, according to all the professional scientists. So, may I ask, why is it so all-fired impossible for earlier human types to have done the same? Also, would some anthropologists please explain how our brown bears, elk, moose, and so on got over here from Northeast Asia, where they originated? You can't have it both ways. Either these things are apes, or they're man-like creatures. Everybody says they look like men, even if dressed in monkey suits. Men have gotten here, but the apes have not. Isn't this exactly what the true scientists have been saying all along? Bob and Roger feel that these creatures are definitely human, or at least what scientists call hominid. They may be the last of their race or subspecies or other species of us people, and Bob and Roger want them conserved, or at least given a chance. Above all, they don't want mobs armed with high-powered automatic rifles barging in by the thousands and driving the already overworked and understaffed sheriffs, local and state police out of their minds. Another point. The Minister of Recreation for the Canadian Cabinet, Mr. Kenneth Kirian, has expressed sincere interest in these efforts. So also has our Secretary of the Interior, the Honorable Stuart Udall. The conservation angle to all this is serious enough, but there are other angles that we will not get into at this time. Now comes the end of the story. The leading news media, but not the working press, I should stress, treated this whole thing as an uproarious joke. But one of our leading picture magazines showed genuine interest and arranged for the films and outtakes to be shown to representatives of the departments of zoology and anthropology at the American Museum of Natural History. Once again, as in Canada, the press wire services were on hand, but were informed, in closed session, I am told, by these experts that the whole thing was nothing but a colossal hoax. The exact expression used by their spokesperson being, as reported to me, not kosher. And the reason is alleged to have been simply that such a creature as depicted was impossible. The use of this term, in this case, seemed to imply that while considered a hoax, it was short of a fraud, but if the creature depicted is impossible, then, for my money, it can only be a man-made thing and thus an outright fraudulent design. I have failed to receive any suggestions for a third alternative. This is manifestly a most unsatisfactory situation. Furthermore, their verdict pronounced upon the pictures was handed down so fast that no time could have been given for a proper, thorough, and truly scientific examination of the pictures to have been made. Finally, the existence of such a creature is not impossible. So we, Argosy that is, decided to do something practical. We did. It took time, patience, and real cooperation from several other leading scientists. This is what we did. First, our publisher, Mr. Harry Steger, picked up the tab for the film and pictures so that Bob and Roger and Al could get home for a couple of days for Thanksgiving. Next, I and my friend and partner, Desmond Slattery, drove down to Washington, D.C., where we set up a showing of the film and outtakes and blow-ups of all kinds. Then Argosy editor Milt Macklin flew down with the film, and brought his son Jason along, since he is a budding photographer, and an electronics wizard as well, in that he ran 2 tape recordings at different speeds for 5 solid hours. We then assembled the following persons. 1. Mr. N.O. Wood, Jr., Director of Management Operations for the U.S. Department of Interior, representing the Honorable Secretary of that Department, Stuart Udall, on his written request to us. 2. Dr. A. Joseph Raitt, Chief Geographer, U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, currently of the U.S. Department of Commerce, also a human ecologist. 3, Dr. John R. Napier, Doctor of Science, Director of Primate Biology Program, the Smithsonian Institution, world-known expert on human, ape, and monkey musculature movement and the anatomy of their hands and feet. 4, Dr. Vladimir Marktok, Associate Professor of Archaeology in the University of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. 5, Dr. Alan Bryan, Professor of Anthropology at the University of Alberta, Edmonton, Canada. Also present were several of us on the other side of the fence. Let me call them the journalists or newsboys or whatever you want. In addition to Des Slattery and Milt Macklin and myself, there was present Tom Allen, currently writer and editor on the editorial staff of the National Geographic Society. Tom has been a working newsman all his life. For 7 years, a feature writer and editor of the Sunday New York Daily News, and then managing editor of Chilton Books in Philadelphia. During a 4-hour session, the films and stills were shown, examined under high magnification, challenged, questioned, argued about, and studied. The scientists did not agree on all points. They did not even all see exactly the same details in the often hard-to-read blow-ups. But after careful scrutiny over a period of hours, not one voiced the suspicion that there was a vague possibility that someone with enormous funds, a strange, undecipherable motivation, a disregard for life and limb, and an enormous knowledge of anatomy, physiology, photography, and human psychology might have been clever enough to set up a hoax good enough to fool the top experts in their field. In addition, in a separate screening, the film was shown to Dr. Osman Hill, head of the Yerkes Regional Primate Research Center at Emory University. Dr. Hill said, among other things, "All I can say, that is, if this was a masquerade, it was extremely well done and effective." He also expressed the feeling that this evidence was strong enough to induce some group to mount an expedition to search for further evidence. So what's the next step? At this point, everything clearly indicates the need for a major expedition with helicopters, two-way radios, and possibly dogs to set on the trail of the next Bigfoot scene, though I've heard that dogs usually run the other way when they get a whiff of the Bigfoot spoor. I can guarantee one thing for myself and Argosy Magazine. This story is definitely to be continued. Copyright Ivan T. Sanderson, Argosy Magazine, February 1968. Article courtesy of Tom Casino. Colored photographs, article courtesy Chris Murphy and Renee DeHinden, 1999. The Scientific View. Here are the views of 3 men acknowledged to be top experts in their respective fields concerning the remarkable creatures shown on these films. Dr. A. Joseph Wright, Chief Geographer, U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey. His view: the presence of large, hairy, human-like creatures in North and Central America, often referred to as Sasquatch, appears very logical when the physiographic history and the northern part of this continent is considered. The statement often made that monkey-like creatures were never developed in Northern America may easily be discounted, for these creatures are more human-like than ape-like, and they apparently migrated here, rather than representing the product of indigenous evolution. The recent physiographic history of the polar edges of the North America reveals that the land migration of these creatures from Asia to America is a distinct and logical possibility. The compelling reason for this distinct possibility is that a land bridge between Asia and North America is known to have existed several times within the last million years, at various intervals during the Pleistocene or Ice Age. The land bridges, both on the north and south sides of the Bering Sea, were admirably suitable for migrations several times during the Ice Age. It appears then that these hairy, human-like creatures, sometimes called Sasquatch, could easily have migrated to North America at several times during the Ice Age. This is particularly plausible when it is considered that conditions were mild in that area when the land bridges existed. These creatures could have then found conditions along the way similar to their Asian mountain habitat and could naturally have migrated across the bridges. Dr. John R. Napier, Director of Primate Biology Program, Smithsonian Institution. His view? First, I observed nothing that on scientific grounds would point conclusively to a hoax. I am satisfied that the walk of the creature shown in the film was consistent with the biped striding gait of man, except in the action of the feet, which were not visible. I have two reservations that are both subjective. First, the slow cadence of the walk and the fluidity of the bodily movements, particularly the arms, struck me as exaggerated, almost self-conscious in comparison with modern man. Second, my impression was that the subject was male, in spite of the contrary evidence of heavy pendulous breast. The body, the appearance of the high crest on top of the skull is unknown in man, but given a creature is heavily built as the subject, such a biomechanical adaptation to an exclusively fibrous raw vegetable diet is not impossible. The presence of this crest, which occurs only in male non-human primates such as the gorilla and the orangutan, tends to strengthen my belief that this creature is a male. Finally, it might be supposed that the creature with a heavy head, heavy jaw and musculature, and a massive upper body would have a center of gravity placed at a higher level than in man. The position of center of gravity modifies the gait, and the easy stride shown in the film is not in harmony with a high center of gravity. Some of the questions I have raised might be solved by a scientific frame-by-frame analysis of the gait and body proportions, and a study of the joint angulations of limb and displacements. Well, this should be done. The opinions I have expressed on this remarkable film are those of an expert witness, rather than a member of a jury. And Dr. Osman Hill, Director of Yerkes Regional Primate Research Center, Emory University. His view? The creature portrayed is a primate and clearly hominid rather than pongid. Its erect attitude in locomotion, the gait, stride, and manner of that locomotion, as well as the relative proportions of pelvic to pectoral limb, are all manifestly human, together with the great development of the mammary glands. This does not, of course, preclude the possibility that it is indeed a Homo sapiens masquerading as a hairy giant. All I can say at this stage is that if this was a masquerade, it was extremely well done and effective. Without tangible evidence in the form of skeletal parts, a cast of the dentition, or similar physical material, I cannot pronounce beyond this group. However, the most interesting evidence they have so painstakingly produced should serve to stimulate the formation of a truly scientific expedition to the area, with the object of obtaining the required physical data. The biography of Ivan T. Sanderson. Husband to Alma, 1911 through 1973. Sanderson received degrees with honors in geology, zoology, and botany, and headed 6 expeditions in all parts of the world for such groups as the British Museum, Cambridge and London universities, the Linnean Societies of London, and at the Chicago Natural History Museum. He was the author of many books. One, Animal Treasures, was a Book of the Month selection in 1937. Others include The Hairy Primitives of Ancient Europe, 1967, Caribbean Treasure, Animals Nobody Knows, Living Treasure, Animal Tales, How to Know American Mammals, The Monkey Kingdom, and Living Mammals of the World, The Abominable Snowmen, Legend Come to Life, written in 1961, and countless articles for various publications and Argosy magazine, where he was science editor. Argosy, exclusive, first photos, California's Abominable Snowman. This is the end of this reading. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.